And that's why yesterday's or today's headline in the New York Times is so misleading. It's like a Pravda headline. It says the Goldstone report finds both sides guilty of war crimes. Well, that's technically true, but an accurate headline would have read, Goldstone reports Israel guilty of massive war crimes and also faults Hamas. That's what a true headline would have read.
Well, Israel refused to cooperate with the investigation and has claimed the UN Human Rights Council that ordered it was biased against Israel. This is some of what the Israeli Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Yigal Pamor, had to say about the inquiry.
This fact-finding mission was established in sin. This is why Israel was unable to cooperate with it. The resolution in virtue of which the commission was established was so extreme in its phrasing and in its prejudging of any conclusion that all European countries and other democratic countries did not support it. It was adopted with the support of human rights models such as Libya, Bangladesh, Cuba. This, of course, has no moral value whatsoever. So we didn't feel that this was binding in any way. In spite of everything I've just said, Israel is going to study this report, to examine it very carefully, as we have with all national and international human rights reports. We are taking this seriously, and we are committed, as always, to abide by international law.
Israel's response to the Goldstone report. Your response, Norman Finkelstein.
Well, Richard Goldstone is a very respected jurist, and he also has a long record of being very supportive of Israel. If I'm not mistaken, he sits on the Hebrew University of Jerusalem Board of Directors. Now, when the UN Human Rights Council asked Goldstone to chair the mission, originally, his mandate was just to investigate Israeli crimes. He himself said he couldn't fulfill that mandate unless it was modified and included crimes on all sides. The Human Rights Council said, fine, we'll modify the mandate and we'll accept your terms. At that point, Richard Goldstone accepted to head the mission. So you have to ask yourself the question, if what the gentleman said were true, why did Goldstone accept? If it were so biased, he always had the option of saying no. Why would a well-known supporter of Israel have accepted that mandate if it were biased against Israel?
What do you think, Norman Finkelstein, are the limitations of the report?
The main limitation of the report is it's all cast in the language of violations of the laws of war. And the fundamental fact about what happened in Gaza is it wasn't a war. There was no war in Gaza. That's the main misunderstanding about what happened there. In fact, one of Israel's leading strategic analysts, he said after what happened in Gaza, he said, the one mistake Israelis are making is that there was a war there. He said there was no war. There were no battles in Gaza. The picture is fairly clear. Israel flew about 3,000 sorties over Gaza. Every plane came back. None was damaged. None was downed. There was no fighting in Gaza. If you read the reports that were issued by the testimonies of the Israeli soldiers, the one consistent theme in all of the testimonies was they never met any Hamas militants. They never engaged in any battles. Some of the Israeli soldiers expressed exasperation. We came here to fight. We're not fighting anyone. There were no battles. There were no Hamas militants in the field. The basic fact is a couple of Israeli soldiers said, one of them said, this was like PlayStation computer game. Another Israeli soldier said, literally, I'm quoting exactly, almost word for word, he said it was like a child with a magnifying glass burning ants. That's what Gaza was like. One soldier after another, literally. I wish listeners would just bring up the report. It's called Breaking the Silence. And then enter under the search mechanism, just enter the word insane. One soldier after another, after another, after another said Israel used insane amounts of firepower. Insane amounts of firepower. There were no soldiers, no battles, but they're using insane amounts of firepower. One soldier said, 2 soldiers actually talked about how the ground was trembling because of all the bombing and all of the missiles and all of the rockets. Another said that we were told, even though we were firing in the distance, we were told to evacuate the houses we were in because the shaking from the distance was going to cause the house to collapse over our heads. It was a massacre in Gaza. And you don't really see that because they're measuring everything against what they call the laws of war. But you're applying laws of war to a massacre. There was no war there.
Israel called the attack Operation Cast Lead. It's interesting. Judge Goldstone's daughter was interviewed on Israeli Army radio. She spoke in Hebrew. And she responded about her father. She described him as a Zionist who loves Israel. She said that my father took on this job because he thought he's doing the best thing for peace, for everyone, and also for Israel. The significance of this report now, the UN Human Rights Council will meet the day after Yom Kippur in about 2 weeks to meet specifically in a special session on this report. And what does this mean for Israel, the quote of the Israeli official to Haaretz saying we don't want to be put into the International Criminal Court?
I personally don't think that's yet going to go very far because the U.S. has effective power to block it. What's significant about the report, in my opinion, and what's significant about what happened in Gaza, I think it marks a major turning point. It's like the Sharpeville massacre in South Africa. Now, Sharpeville is not Soweto, but Sharpeville was a turning point. Richard Goldstone is a liberal. Richard Goldstone is very supportive of Israel. And it's now marking the breakup of liberal Jewish support for Israel. And as we both know, and as all of your listeners know, Jews are overwhelmingly liberal in their sentiments. 79% of Jews in the last election voted for Obama. And what you're seeing now is the breakup of Jewish support for Israel. You saw during the Gaza massacre, you had some of the old-timers like Alan Dershowitz, Michael Walzer, characters like Martin Peretz, characters like that, kind of comical figures coming out supporting Israel. But if you looked at the younger Jewish constituency, bloggers like Matt Iglesias, Glenn Greenwald, and so forth, they all opposed the Gaza massacre from almost like day 1 or day 2. And then you had significant defections like Andrew Sullivan, who, not Jewish, but still a significant figure, who also came out against the Gaza massacre. So I think now what you're seeing, especially with the Goldstone report, especially with his stature, especially because he's Jewish, especially because he's liberal, what it's signaling now is the breakup of Jewish support and liberal support, and those are basically the same thing, the breakup of liberal Jewish support for Israel.
Norman Finkelstein, I want to thank you for being with us. Just recently back from Gaza, visited in June. Norman Finkelstein has written a number of books, among them Image and Reality of the Israel-Palestine Conflict and Beyond Chutzpah. His forthcoming book about Israel's assault on Gaza is due out on the first anniversary of the attack on December 27th.